it's Miss Miller here, and today I'm going to take you through our final approach to literature, and that's critical theories, a Marxist read of our new text entitled The Necklace. We sort of stepped away from Flowers for Algernon, not necessarily because it was time and it was sort of overdone with all the different theories, but because it didn't really lend itself to a Marxist read. So if you take a look at the image above, it talks about inequality, and that is definitely addressed in The Necklace. So let's see how it sort of manifests itself in the text. One thing you should also know, I feel like when you read The Necklace, the text, that you could apply many of the theories that we've already discussed, the formalist approach with the symbol of the necklace. You could apply a psychoanalysis and this conflict that she has within herself and society. You could also apply a feminist approach, and they did make some sort of suggestive or assertions about how she is sort of defined as a woman in the text. So in this case, we're going to look at it for a Marxist perspective. I want to do that by first sort of introducing you to two people. One would be Karl Marx, a German philosopher and economist, and I wanted to distinguish him from the author of the text, Guy de Maupassant, and he's the author of The Necklace. Now, our work is going to be centered around Karl Marx and his theory as it applies to the text. Now, his main premise is this idea of the boss versus the worker. And if you want to think of it as the teacher versus the students, you can do that. That might help you really grasp this concept. But so we think of it right now in a setting that we have, the teacher sort of dominates the classroom setting and governs the society or the culture of the classroom. And you look at the big fish there as one big teacher, that would be me, and then all the little fish, which would include all of the students, that would be you. Now, Karl Marx really sides with you. He wants to see a change or a shift in power, and he feels like, you know what, the big boss or the owners or me, the teacher, shouldn't have the power. We shouldn't possess the power. So if all of the students sort of gather together, they together, right, would outnumber me, right? And all of a sudden you would dominate the culture and you would dominate the society. So that's the best way for me to explain it. That's a major premise for a Marxist read. And Karl Marx sides with whoever is being oppressed, whichever there's more of. He believes that they could come together and sort of outnumber or outweigh or dominate the big guy. Now, you can tell if a text sort of lends itself to a Marxist read because they will bring up the poor. You'll see really a clear distinction of the people who are poor in the text. The middle image is of Karl Marx, but on the two sides you'll see someone who's really poor, right? Our main character and her husband, and the oppressed. And they're oppressed. You'll see why, because of the struggle they have, and they're wanting to do this, and they are oppressed for much of their lives. I mean, they spend 10 years working off this necklace. So that's what creates the oppression. And so Karl Marx really favors this character, and we'll see how it's portrayed in the work The Necklace. It doesn't really turn out very well for him, or for Matilda. Now, according to Karl Marx, he felt like literature should sort of instigate change, it sort of fuel change, it makes it happen. And of course, I think this can be a part of any critical theory where the idea of literature is really a reflection of the culture, which means you can read a piece of literature and see the same sort of images in the culture during that time frame. And so Karl Marx sort of played with the idea that, you know what, it doesn't have to always, literature doesn't always have to be a reflection of culture, but literature could actually have an impact on culture, which means if we want to see the change, it happens with the literature first. And if we read about, you know, the poor sort of dominating the wealthy, then maybe that might transfer over to the culture. And so that's what that looks like.
Please report to the office.
Sorry for the interruption.
Please report to the office.
Okay, now just like the psychoanalysis, there was the subconscious, right? There's a political subconscious that sort of works in a Karl Marx theory, and this is this idea that no matter what, any group that you have, there's always going to be this thing called a social pecking order. Think, for example, when we work together collaboratively in our small groups on Mondays, and there's always someone who sort of steps up and takes over this role, and everybody else sort of falls into their place. And not necessarily that this assertion is true, and I don't know if I necessarily agree with it, but according to Karl Marx, there's a political subconscious that happens without us even knowing. So just something to think about. According to him, any group, so you even in society, in our text, we see this natural pecking order, and obviously in this case the rich would be on top and the poor would be the oppressed group. Signs of a Marxist reading, again, if there is some sort of economic power, we see who possesses the power. Materialism versus spirituality, more about materialism, and you could see in the early stages of the text that Matilda really talked about all the things that she's desired. I mean, she was very materialistic. And then this conflict that exists between the classes, and not necessarily that they had a feud, but there was clearly a problem. I think Matilda even at one point didn't want to visit her friend because she felt so uncomfortable about the wealth that her good friend possessed. And then the art and the literature. We'll probably just cover a couple of these in this lecture because that's how much is actually addressed in the text, or at least our excerpt of the text. So there's two main classes, and it's just the rich and the poor. You've done all of the work already for the necklace, but I wanted to give you the actual terms from a Karl Marx position. The rich would be characterized as bourgeoisie. I'm sure you've heard of the term bougie. She's very bougie, right? So the correct term is bourgeoisie. So use that in your discussions. And then for the poor, that would be the proletariat. Okay, so that would be Matilda and her husband in this case. And so those are the two main classes. There isn't a middle group according to Karl Marx. It's just two groups. And he feels like this system is truly flawed. There's the character desire for social value versus necessity, which we see in this case Matilda, all she wants is to have, silk hanging from hallways. She wants to have necklace and shoes and do all of these things, not because she needs it, not out of necessity to live, but because she wants it for that social value, because she likes how it feels, and you see her just sort of dreamy in every chance that she gets. And this idea of having things or buying things, purchasing things because you wanted and not because you needed is called commodification. And that's how the proletariats, or in this case the poor, are oppressed, meaning that's how they just keep on being poor. Matilda, unfortunately, will never be a bourgeoisie. And part of the problem is she wants everything that the bourgeois have, or the bourgeoisies have, and she seeks that throughout the text. She's constantly pulling for it. And as a result, she's in this perpetual cycle of poverty. And that's the proletariat struggle, which leads ultimately to her destruction, because if we see at the end of the story, she runs into her friend who looks youthful, who's a member of the bourgeoisie class, and she is a proletariat who's been struggling for the last 10 years to repay a necklace that wasn't even real to begin with, right? And so it led to her destruction. She is the one who looked old and worn down. So that concludes our study of a Marxist read of the necklace. So I hope that was really helpful. Thank you.